nearly every production vehicle runs an airbox. So here are my thoughts on why keeping your airbox is a good idea and how to modify it in a way that doesn't remove the benefits you get from using an airbox. Let's start with something that's not a KTM. The advantage of an airbox is that it creates a reservoir of air that the engine can draw on as it needs. And the first thing that people do when they're going to modify a bike like this is to take this and throw it away. But that tends to produce an unreliable bike. This reservoir has three things. It's full of calm air, it's full of cold air, and it's full of dry air. If this was the inlet into the engine, and if the engine is sucking through this from a calm air source, it will achieve maximum rate of flow through it. If the air is spinning around and moving in different directions at speed, it will be competing with the engine, and the engine will find it harder to pull air through. So calm air we want, and next thing we want is cold air. So what we don't want to be doing is to be drawing the air off the engine or off the exhaust. And calm air also means that we want to pull it from somewhere around the bike that has relatively calm air. We don't want the inlet out in the slipstream of the bike because we're not running forced injection, which is a completely different ball game. So calm, cold, and dry. If you're riding in the rain, we don't want the rain getting into the airbox. We don't want it being splashed up from the wheels. This is the inlet into the airbox, and the air filter sits inside here, and this is the inlet, and this sits underneath the side cover of the bike. So it's protected, it's facing backwards, so it doesn't scoop up water, it doesn't have air rammed into it, it can be pulled in as the engine needs it. The KTM Duke is somewhat similar. So we have the airbox here, the air inlet is right at the bottom of the airbox, and it runs up through a snorkel that runs up underneath here, and feeds in from under this tail cover. So again, it's well away from the exhaust, it's pulling air from a calm place, and it's a dry place because it's inside the bodywork of the vehicle. So those three things are satisfied by the airbox, and the airbox is quite nice and big, so it has a reservoir of cool, dry, cold air for the engine to draw from. What we have is we have that air intake coming in from the underneath. One mod I've seen more than once is to drill holes in the bottom of the airbox so that you avoid this, and it is a bit of a restriction. You've got this restricted inlet coming in. So let's drill some holes in the bottom, allow maximum airflow through. It's a great idea, but sitting just underneath this airbox is the engine, and sitting just here is the pre-silencer and the cat, which get very hot. You are then pulling hot air into the airbox. You've also got all the spray from the bike hitting the back end of this airbox. You've got spray coming down from the back wheel. All of this will be going into the airbox through those holes. And if you've got a stock paper filter, well, you're going to have real issues. Even if you've got modified to something like a K&N or DNA or whatever filter, that's going to get dirty very quickly. It's going to restrict your airflow. So I don't recommend drilling holes in here or doing other sorts of inlet modifications. But I do like, which is to fit an additional filter on the top, and that really puts through as much air as you're ever going to want going through this airbox. Now, this is the Cooper version, or supposed to be the Cooper version anyway, but some people like to do a bit of DIY, make one yourself. I mean, after all, even these are relatively expensive. You can print them up, but honestly, you could just go with a stock lid and modify it. What I would say, if you are going to go this route, is that you need to be careful that you have a good quality airbox foam on the back of it, because this is a primary source of air going into the airbox. This is not something that's going through the filter afterwards, don't forget. So this is your only filter. and a lot of the air going into the engine will be coming through this, so make sure it's a good filter. The other thing is to make sure it's very, very well glued to the actual top unit. I've heard of some cases where the foam has come unstuck because it wasn't properly glued down and got sucked into the throttle body. Now bear in mind that's most likely to happen when you are at full throttle. So the last thing you want to be doing is finding your engine stalling at full throttle. So really be careful if you make these yourself. And I would recommend, you probably can't see, but there are some little dents in the foam just along this back edge where it gets trapped against the top edge of the air filter. There's still a gap between it and the air filter because this is sitting at an angle like this and the filter is sitting at an angle like this. But just along this edge, it gets trapped. So I'd recommend you make sure you have a good depth of air foam on this so that that gets trapped. So if it does come unglued, it'll still be caught and won't get sucked into the engine. There is one more mod you can do with this airbox which makes a dramatic difference, and that is to mod the inlet runner. Once you've made all your modifications with filters and such to get more air into the airbox, what you don't want is to have issues getting out again, and that's what the intake runner modification improves. You can buy a complete modified airbox from Grey Area to KTM where they have modified this inlet runner. So those are the main modifications for this airbox, and with them you will achieve maximum airflow. But if you've done this, then you really need to be running a higher rate of fuel through the injector than the stock one. You can do it whatever your favorite method is. Simplest one is simply to fit a bigger injector. The pump provides adequate pressure for it. I spoke about drilling holes in the bottom of the airbox and why I'm not particularly keen on that, but some people want to delete the airbox altogether. So this is how it sits in the bike. You've got the airbox here as we've discussed, and it plugs into the throttle body. So why not simply take this off and plug a cone filter directly onto it, or if you go the Chimera route, to have a tube and have a big air filter directly onto it. Do away with all the inlet and everything else. As you would have guessed from my previous comments, I'm not so keen for a street bike because that cone filter is sitting, again, it's sitting directly above the exhaust and directly behind the engine, so it's sucking in relatively hot air. It's not sucking in from a calm air source, and it sits out in the wet. My recommendation is go for the Chimera type thing if you've got a track bike or a bike you only ever need to ride when it's really nice weather and it's not going to rain. So thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon.